Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hey, everybody.
Good job, Tracy. We're with The Road to Retail, and on our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples of how small, emerging, and challenger CPG brands, consumer packaged goods, can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business through to the consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's important to you. The bottom line is we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important aspects of this journey to establishing and growing your brand. Tracy and I have made a lot of mistakes over the years, and if we can save you some time and pain, we'd love to help. Tracy?
Yeah, Bruce and I have been in commercial operations, consumer packaged goods for 30 plus years. And what we mean by commercial operations is sales, marketing, trade marketing, sales and divestitures, managing distributors, managing brokers, just a whole host of experiences that we have. And as Bruce said, that it's our intent on this podcast is to share those experiences and key learnings with you. Also, you've probably noticed that we've had the opportunity to interview friends and colleagues on the podcast as well, brand founders, service providers that also share their experiences as well. And we hope that you have found the podcast really helpful. I did want to mention, Bruce, before we start this morning, is that we are now available on both iTunes and also on Spotify. So I know a lot of our listeners are busy, on the go kind of guy folks. And so if you have the opportunity, you're at the gym, on the train, on the plane, you can easily download our podcast now on Spotify as well as iTunes. Certainly, you can still listen to our podcast on our YouTube channel, as well as the link on the post, which we do every 2 weeks on our LinkedIn page, Road to Retail. So Bruce, tell the audience today what we're going to talk about.
Well, first off, Tracy, I find it hard to believe that all these busy people can't drop everything and listen to our podcast. So the fact that, we now are able to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify is great. So today, again, we have a bit of a serious topic because it's impacting almost every business everywhere, and it's all over the press. It's on TV. It's probably discussions at your kitchen table if you're a really small company, or in conference rooms or on Zoom calls. And it's price increases. Okay. We're having a lot of inflation right now across a myriad of inputs. There's some rays of sunshine that maybe some of the international shipping is starting to untangle itself from a supply chain standpoint, but let's let that prove out first. So we get lots of questions, and we're also involved in how you go about considering a price increase, and then the order and sequence of events that have to happen in order for you to execute this. So pretty juicy topic today, and lots of things to consider. This is not, for you people that haven't been in this business before, this is not as simple as, man, I got some price increases from my suppliers, therefore I'm just going to pass it on. Do that at your own peril. And you can do it, but you just have to check a lot of boxes to make sure you understand what can and will happen in some cases. Tracy, so why don't you help the folks here? So when should they consider taking a price increase?
Yeah, great question, Bruce. So really what you need to look at is what in your P&L is increasing. So is it your costs increasing from just your contract manufacturing? Is it your ingredients going up? A lot of brands source their ingredients, from overseas. So they're experiencing increases in transportation of those ingredients. You may find your shipping to the retailer or shipping from your contract manufacturer is skyrocketing. There's just a myriad of things that could be, increased in your P&L, your packaging costs. So anything that's captured, as a cost could be going up and affecting your margin, and you have to keep, a really close eye on those kinds of things. And if they are going up, then you need to pass that on and take a price increase. I will caution our audience today, because I've been experiencing this lately, where a brand may have taken a price increase early in the year, due to increased cost of what I just mentioned, ingredients, manufacturing cost, shipping. And now they've realized that their prices of those things are going up again, and feel the need that they need to take another price increase. So just timing of the price increase, which we'll talk more about today, is really critical. Distributors and retailers really don't want to see, multiple price increases, throughout the year, if you can avoid it. So Bruce, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, two things. So when your P&L starts getting impacted by inputs, which are some things you can plan for, and some things, if you haven't read your supply agreements really carefully, you'll find that clause 67, subtopic 14, they have the right to take price increases with 30-day notice if something moves by a certain amount. Two things here. One, as irritating as it can be, as we've talked about on some other topics, you have to remain level-headed and clear-eyed. Just because something happens to you, if your knee-jerk reaction is to just pass it on and not think through the ripples, which Tracy and I are going to talk about, it could really backfire on you. So you can't make these moves out of anger, and you can't make them because you feel like you just got screwed. The second thing is, if you're in a couple of national retailers already and you're working with a sales agent or broker to help you navigate that retailer, make sure you listen to those people and take their counsel, because they've probably been in the business a very long time. They know that account very well. And while Tracy and I are going to lay out kind of the order and sequence you should consider, every account has slight nuances. And one of the reasons you're paying these people is to help you navigate those nuances so that you don't, blow yourself up inadvertently. So we're going to move on to the next topic here. So now you're thinking about a price increase, okay? Because you've got some input costs, or you just, maybe you think you can get it, you can pull it off because your momentum is strong, etc. So you really have to think through how your price increase will translate all the way through the process. If you're working through a distributor, which Tracy will touch on in a moment, the retailer will still take their margin. So if you are not a leading brand, which many small challenger brands aren't, and you don't have an unbelievably unique point of difference, you might not be in a position to be the price maker. You might have to be the taker. So you may have to wait until some of the leading brands take price and then calculate through. So I'm making this up, obviously, but if you right now are at the shelf at $6.99 and you want to take 5%, that crosses that threshold to over $7. How will you stack up against your competitive set, right? Because no one exists in a vacuum. There's a lot of chocolate chip companies, skincare companies, beverage companies, you name it. But if suddenly, as a very small company, you are the number one highest priced item of a 4-ounce, this or that, you need to proceed with extreme caution. All right. Because the other thing, as Tracy and I have talked about, no matter what actions you take, the retailer cares really about two things, and they're tied together. Their category performance matters much more than your brand performance. And if your velocities fall below hurdle, you're going to get the call. Hey, Bruce, this isn't going well. What can we do to get sales up? Because right now you're not meeting hurdle. And meeting hurdle means you're performing at a level which warrants remaining on their shelf and in distribution at that account. Tracy, anything else?
Yeah, two things that I thought about. One is, I want to really encourage our audiences, of small emerging brands, to be a student of the category. So get into your local retailers and really look at what is going on in the category. Bruce and I were talking this morning about like coffee. So if you're in the coffee category, watch what's going on in the category, watch what the prices are doing. The other thing I wanted to recommend also is, if you're thinking about a price increase, as Bruce said, number one, consult your sales agent or your broker. The other thing you may want to think about doing is getting on a phone call with the buyer and saying, hey, my costs are going up. This is what I'm thinking about. And if they'll take the time and you've got a good relationship with them, get on the phone and discuss it with them and run it by them and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is what the impact of my price is going to be. I'm thinking about it doing it next month. What do you think? And maybe get some input. Again, if you've got that kind of relationship with the buyer. What do you think about that idea, Bruce?
No, I like that a lot. And it's a fine line to walk. And again, it gets back to your sales agent or broker. Tracy and I have talked about one of the things that retailers hate are needy brands that are always on the phone because they have a shipping problem, or they have 10,000 questions, or they can't figure out how to log on to the portal. So if you have that relationship and you can kind of bounce off what you're thinking, that's great. And if you don't, hopefully you do have that relationship with your broker or sales agent, right?
Yeah.
Now, one other thing about pricing, and Tracy used a good example in coffee. If your price increase is being driven by one input that might get a lot of publicity, like coffee or cocoa or maybe dairy, you need to be prepared that if that commodity starts really falling in price, you might get the phone call of, hey, when are you lowering price? That happens a lot in categories and brands that are highly influenced by the price of a singular input. So be aware that this can swing, both ways. If you think that your increase might just be temporary, you might just want to sit on your hands and, bite the bullet for a short period of time. But again, one other thing, and we said it before, is be very careful crossing those thresholds. Okay. Every retailer probably has threshold prices and how they divide up their category. They have their opening price point items and then things kind of good, better, best. So just kind of know, if no one in that category is selling something over $6.99 and you're going to be the first person to cross that bridge, be careful. There's probably a reason in their mind that no one has crossed it before. And you also have to understand that when you take price, a retailer may tack on another 1 or 2 margin points for them. So while you may have done all the calculations to say, hey, I can take this 5% and not cross $6.99. And then they choose to tack on 2 margin points and go from a 35 to 37. Oops. Now you're over $6.99 and they might want you to buy your way down under it. So you start giving some money back right away. Tracy, how do you work the price increase if you work through a distributor?
Yeah. So every distributor is going to require a 90-day announcement, basically, before the price would actually go into effect. So the way that works is in distributors, they have forms you have to fill out. But the big thing is you need to make sure that on company letterhead, you have an announcement. I'm taking a price increase on my products of XYZ, and explain why. My ingredients have increased, my shipping has increased, my contract manufacturing price has increased. And so I need to take a price increase. So that explanation needs to be concise and succinct. I can't, really encourage you to do that. Got to be on company letterhead, usually from the CFO or CFO, explaining the details, and then the paperwork will follow. And then, as an example, I just did this with a brand, and for example, UNFI, they'll tell you then, okay, we got your price increase, and the new price will be effective, 90 days from now, and that's XYZ date. So you'll know exactly when that new price will take into effect to their retail partners. So that's really important, though. Again, on letterhead, explanation, and you may even be challenged, as Bruce mentioned, and asked for specifics of, well, what ingredient is going up, or why is your shipping going up? So they may ask some really detailed questions about the price increase, and you need to be prepared to answer those questions.
Yeah, a couple of things here to add on to Tracy's points. When he says justification, so it can be a letter. It can also be a very short presentation deck. And I'm talking, folks, like 3 pages tops. 1 page might be 2 or 3 bullet points of why you're taking it and what it's going to be. And another page will be highlight the inputs that are going up or the rationale, and possibly a third page with an incredibly brief, simple spreadsheet of like, this ingredient went up this much, shipping went up this much. And you might even put in if some of your A&P has gone up, because again, you need to drive that demand. And if they know that you're investing in the brand, you know, that can work for you, but play that one by ear. But if you lay out that simple spreadsheet and you actually show that your input costs have gone up 18% and you're asking for 5%, it looks a bit more favorable. But one thing to remember, all the real estate in any retailer's stores is theirs, right? They don't have to justify anything to you because they control who gets on their shelf. So occasionally you'll hear, oh, they're just not fair. Well, they don't have to be. Again, it's all about their category performance, and your brand is a small component of that. Tracy, you touched on it a little bit. How about the timing of the price increase? You talked about the 90 days. When does that actually ripple through and the brand will actually start to see and realize that those new prices reflected on their invoices?
So it'll be not the 90 days. So in my example, like, and I use UNFI, they'll tell you, hey, I just did this recently. The price increase is effective November 27th, as an example that I just went through. And so that new price will be reflected to their retail partners. And then it'll really vary on when it will actually be at the retail shelf. It just depends on how on the ball the retailers are. The natural independent stores may be a little bit longer, but the bigger chains will take it, immediately and reflect that, on the shelf pretty close after the 90 days.
Okay, great. So a couple of other things, folks, is with some retailers, they will ask for a delay. You'll give them 90-day warning, and they might say, oh, geez, we're doing this or that, or our fiscal year is ending. Is there any way we could have 110? So you have to make those decisions of how firmly you're going to take a stand. But a lot of retailers are going to want to negotiate with you. Okay, but we'll get into that in a moment. The other thing, once, as Tracy said, all your documents are in, the price increase is communicated, etc. Another thing you need to do and work with your distributor, if you have one, or your own shipping firm, is you have to control forward buying. Mm-hmm. Because if your brand is material enough, they'll try to buy maybe a month's worth of inventory on the last day before the price increase takes effect. So this can have several negative impacts on you. One, you could get some really big orders, which might press your cash flow and your inventory for other retailers or other avenues where you sell product. It'll also further delay you realizing your new prices. And if you have more than one retailer, they might be monitoring each other, and they'll be like, how come so-and-so hasn't taken their price yet? So you have to really work with them. A number that I've used over the years is we would allow 2 weeks forward buying. So you take whatever your sales have been over the last 52 weeks with that account, divide it by 52, get a weekly number, and allow them to make that 1-2 week forward buy. Because you got to control it. And that's something that until you kind of get a fastball off the forehead, you might not think of it. So be alert to that one. Tracy, what about the benefits of a price increase?
One thing I wanted to add, though,
oh, please,
that you prompted me to think about when you were talking about shelf space, that the retailer controls, that space. Also remember, small emerging brands, they control the price. So even though you say I'm taking a 5% price increase, that should put my retail at $6.99, as Bruce gave that example. Again, they may decide to take a few more points, and you may be $7.09, $7.19, $7.29. You have no control over that. The retailer controls their pricing, and you cannot dictate that. So that's a very fine line to think about when you're looking at the price increase.
Yeah. Hey, Trace, that's a great point. So one other thing just to add there, So kind of a derivative of what Tracy just said is your price increase has been approved. They're ultimately going to take it, but they want 90 days. They may juice your retail to what they think the new retail will be immediately.
Yes.
Okay. So now they have 90 more days of purchasing at your old price, but they might start trying to sell it at the new price and just see what happens to the demand. And you could sit there and go, wait a minute, they're not giving me the new price yet. Again, as Tracy just said, doesn't matter. So some of this stuff can be negotiated or discussed in good faith up front, but ultimately they can do what they want.
Yes, absolutely. So the benefits of the price increase, obviously, one is you're covering your increased costs of ingredients or shipping or manufacturing, all of that. So you definitely want to make sure that you know, are covering your costs. And then you may actually improve your margins by taking the price increase as well. But again, our advice would be don't be greedy. You know, if your cost of goods and your profit margin is, you know, 40%, and your price increase takes you to 41, 42%, but don't allow it to go, oh man, now I can make, you know, 50 margin. That's going to really raise some eyebrows at a retailer if you try to take too much and be greedy. So we advise you not to do that. But there are definitely benefits to the price increase of a price increase. We see it all the time now. It's very, you know, common because prices are going up. We are, you know, in an inflation time period, but just be real cognizant and thoughtful about what you're doing. And I think that's the message that Bruce and I want to leave today.
Yeah. So Tracy and I flipped the coin, and Tracy got to talk about the benefits of a price increase, and I get to talk about the negatives. So here we go. So first off, when you take that price increase, it very likely will disrupt the brand's growth, at least in the short term, right? Because any high school economics class, supply and demand, if you raise price, volume usually goes down. Okay. And you have to be alert to this because you don't want to fall below your thresholds of sales expectations, at least not for too long. The sales volumes will initially shock some consumers until they adjust to the new price. Now, again, truth be told, we all think that our brand is the most important thing on the planet and that everyone knows exactly what it costs. That's called an anchor price. And there's probably a few products that very knowledgeable consumers know, and they know them cold. A lot of people have what I'll call a ballpark anchor price. They know something is about $6. So if you go to like 612 or something, they might be like, I guess that's still okay. But if you take a big one and then your retailer takes a few more points on top of that, and $6 becomes, you know, 675 or closer to 7, that'll notice. So you have to be careful there. This decline in sales velocity will happen, and we're going to talk about how to dull that impact. But what you can't do is just sit there and watch your brand sales tank and not do anything about it, or you will get what Tracy and I call the call. The retailer will call and say, hey, Bruce, price increase, not a great idea. Volume's off 14%. You're my lowest performer in the category. What are we going to do? So you need to think all of these things through, okay? And some retailers will reject your price increase. Now, you might think, if you're new to this game, what do you mean? It's my business. I can do what I want. Well, you can, but so can they. So they might say, and especially the EDLP, everyday low price retailers, and you can name them, they tend to negotiate very hard. Even in these inflationary times, they take it as a badge of honor to protect their shoppers. So if you go in somewhere thinking you're going to get 7, you might walk out with 2.8. And instead of incorporating new pricing in 90 days, it might be 120. So be prepared that this is not a simple exercise of add a 5% price increase into your P&L and that there's no volume hit and that your growth projections will continue. Okay. This is also why it's so critical to small emerging brands. When you go to retail, you have no history. Make sure you price properly. And as Tracy said up front, know where you're going to land price-wise on the shelf within your competitive set. Okay. The little guys generally cannot be the price makers. They're the price takers. So if you are going to be the highest priced item, you got to have a killer, meaningful point of difference behind you. Tracy, what did I forget there? Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry. If your volumes start to decline after you've taken price, you have to repair that, because there are very few retailers I'm aware of. If you want to go in 6 months later and talk about taking 1 or 2 new items, they're going to look at you like you have 5 heads, because no one wants to extend off a weak or declining parent brand. They want to invest in brands that are growing and that are helping their category perform. Sorry, Tracy.
No, that's good. And I'm glad today you're the Grim Reaper, but it needs to be said. And I think that's one of the purposes of our.
Well, it's almost Halloween. You should see my costume I'm working on.
We thought about doing costumes today, but we decided not to. But we really, that's really the benefit that we try and provide here at Road to Retail Podcast, is to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of making these decisions, like a price increase, like when you get the call, one of our recent episodes, so that we're real with you. So we like to be real and raw and provide you with the insights that we think will help you make these decisions, and also making decisions and thinking through all the way from the beginning to end. As Bruce mentioned, it's so important to think through it, to say, okay, my prices are going up, I've got to take a price increase. But what Bruce mentioned is just gold, is what's the effect of my price increase, and it is going to affect your volume. So we try and make sure that you're not being naive about these decisions that you're making with your brand.
So let's talk about some ways to dull the impact of your price increase. So let's say you've come up with your price increase, you've communicated it, it's been accepted, and you have had the forethought to go, okay, my volume's going to drop, my velocities are going to drop. What do I do? How do I take the sting off of this move? So one thing you can do is, once you have an idea of when your new price is going to reflect on the shelf, you can stack your advertising and promotional plan to try to keep pressure against the consumer. In some cases, a coupon or a discount or some sort of promotional offer to bring your current users in and help them adjust to that new price. Because maybe after they buy it 1 or 2 more times, the anchor price shifts in their head and they've gone from $6 now to $6.50 or whatever. The other thing you can do is try to work with your retailer and adjust the timing of your trade promotion. So maybe you're on some thematic end cap, or possibly you have an ad, or maybe you have a TPR scheduled quarterly, and instead of doing 50 cents, maybe the first 2 are 75 cents. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now at bigger retailers, if you try to get too aggressive right away with price promos, a couple of them will say, hey, Bruce, you're basically admitting your price increase was a bad move, because you're right, doing all these things to lower your price. So again, this is when you seek the counsel of your sales agent or broker, or if you've been in this business at bigger firms and now you're an entrepreneur, just think about how you stack your A&P calendar, especially if you maybe put in a surge of spending for those first 90 days after that new price. That could help you dull the blade with current users, and you might attract some new ones that haven't been in your franchise before. And if they haven't been in, they have no idea what the price was 3 months ago. Tracy?
No, I like what you just said. And I think what you can do is drive trial with some of those promotional activities, couponing, TPR, temporary price reduction, and that will help soften the blow of maybe a volume, decline. But I think you did a great job covering all that, and I think it's realistic, and hopefully our audience today will take all that to heart. So let's talk about what happens if the retailer or distributor says, no, I'm not taking your price increase. You've already taken one maybe earlier in the year, and you've decided I need to take another one. So again, this is where your negotiation skills come into play. Get on the phone with your buyer, explain to them, and you're probably going to have to, if they've rejected it, you're really going to have to dig deep to explain, this ingredient has increased. I used to buy it for 30 cents a pound, and now it's 80 cents a pound. So you're really going to have to be prepared to really deep dive, go deep dive into your cost structure. The other thing you may be able to do is, postpone it for a little while. And as Bruce said, maybe increase your promotional support to the buyer, so to kind of ease that pain a little bit. And then the last resort would be you stop shipping that retailer. We don't recommend going to that level, but that may be an alternative or a solution that you may have to go to. So those are kind of the things that you can do, but hopefully you've got a good relationship with your sales agent broker to help you navigate this. I think that's a key thought today, as well as a good relationship with your buyer that you can work through this price increase. Bruce, did I miss anything?
I don't think so, but just to add a little bit more color, because I had some notes on this one because it's juicy. So as Tracy said, if a retailer rejects your price increase, that unless you're performing badly, it usually opens the door, as Tracy said, to negotiation. Maybe if you delay it a little bit, and it also depends how many retailers you have, right? Because you have to be fair and equitable in your pricing actions. Again, those of you with experience know how this goes. Those of you who don't, you may, again, check with your broker because they've been through this a million times, but you can't give Tracy a great price and me a horrible price, because if you ever got to the size where someone calls you on that, it could get very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the retailers, they might ask for more time. If you went in asking for 5, you might end up walking out of there at 2.5 or 3.2. Okay, so you'll still get it, but maybe it's less and it gets to be impacted later. Sometimes you can also negotiate for participation in certain trade programs, promotions within that retailer, which gives that buyer margin credit. So that could dull the blade. So you're putting pressure against the consumer to get them to buy your products without necessarily lowering your acquisition costs. So you're still getting your price increase, but you do have money going out of your pocket, but at least it's going to drive demand. As Tracy said, you can cut off the retailer until they reflect your new pricing. That is highly dangerous as a small brand. Even as a bigger or middle-sized brand, someone told me early in my career when we were having an issue with this, they said, hey, Bruce, how many retailers in the country absolutely must have your brand for their survival?
Yeah,
that's right. Probably not many. And I had a couple of big brands. I had, brands over $100 million. Okay. So I'll tell you what, in the end, as a small emerging challenger business, it would be better if you had to take some margin compression. If you think your price pressure is I don't want to say transitory, because that hasn't worked out very well for us. But if you think it's temporary, you might just want to sit on your hands. If you do need to take it, know you're probably going to end up negotiating part of it. But here's the deal. If you take a hard stand and you get discontinued from that retailer because they're finding you unreasonable for whatever reason, I'll tell you what, I would rather suffer some margin compression than distribution compression. And this goes all the way back to the start. You got to play the long game. You got to keep your cool, and you have to think through what could happen if you really broke the glass and played hardball. Tracy, did I miss anything there?
No, that was perfect. Again, raw, candid, being realistic about the good, the bad, and the ugly of a price increase.
Yeah, and it's tough, folks. I mean, a lot of the little brands I've worked on or people that we work with now, I mean, it's hard, and it's so tempting to just get your price increase and shove it through. But if you only remember one thing today, any pricing action, well, I'm going to ask you to remember 2. Any pricing action you're thinking of taking, understand what your new prices will be at the retail shelf, and any increase in your prices is going to cause some level of volume decline. Those are the only, if you only remember two things, that's it. Know what your new price will be and how are you going to adjust to that volume decline and try to get your velocities moving back in the right direction. TP, unless you have anything, I think we're ready for the big finish.
Absolutely. Great episode today, Bruce. Hopefully our audience found it helpful. And again, please subscribe to our new channels on Spotify, as well as iTunes under Road to Retail. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on our LinkedIn page. We'll be posting this episode in 2 weeks. And again, we enjoyed this episode and hope you found it helpful. And we will see you next time.
Good luck out there, folks.
Absolutely.